So what if I told you that your scars would become your scaffolding? And I don't know if you've ever heard that, but this applies to our guest today, where his scars have become the scaffolding that has elevated him into part of his journey and part of his purpose and become a big part of his story. So I want to bring in a guy named Adam Davis. And some of you probably know who he is already, but he's former law enforcement and FBI trained hostage negotiator. He has overcome trauma of childhood abuse. He has battled with suicidal thoughts and bouts with potential depression. He has overcome so much, and the redemption story is dripping off of this guy. And he's a best-selling author, written several books, several devotionals tailored to law enforcement officers, that they can really just be empowered on a daily basis to overcome some of these challenges they deal with. And then, he's a spokesperson for what's called REBOOT, which is a nonprofit that provides faith-based trauma healing for first responders and service members, of course. And then something I'm going to go into later, he is a fan of Sheepdogs, and there's a story behind that. So formally, I want to welcome Adam Davis to the show.
Man, I appreciate you having me on, brother, and giving me the opportunity to share with your audience. And I know that this has been a long time coming, but thank you for your patience with me. And man, I'm looking forward to it big time.
Of course, man. It's always an honor to meet someone like yourself. I've kept up with your story. I've listened to a couple of interviews you've done, and every time, man, I get chills. Some of the stories that you're sharing, and just the way God has redeemed you and used you, and is continuing to use you to make a difference. And man, we're starting a series that Adam's going to be the first guest on, a series called Behind the Shield, and was not intended to take any thunder or away from his book called Behind the Badge at all. But I just kind of connected the dots to that a few weeks back. But we're going to talk more about his book. But man, Adam, I mean, we can't help but pour a foundation with this conversation by talking about some of your childhood and some of the things you faced and emotions attached to that, some of the scars, like I said earlier, that have led to your scaffolding, if you will. Man, talk about some of the ways that, your pain has sort of become part of your purpose and your journey.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for giving me an opportunity to be vulnerable and sort of bear something that it was killing me slowly inside. And I think that's what hate, unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment do to any of us, no matter the source or the root cause of it. But yeah, as a little boy, I was sexually abused by an older male neighbor, not a family member. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of fear, a lot of pain. And I held on to that. I didn't talk about it for probably I didn't really start addressing it deeply until my early 20s, right before my first son. First son was born, before my wife gave birth to him, and then in my teens, in the church, something similar happened, but it was an adult married woman who was part of the church leadership. And then to see how the church swept it under the rug and just sort of pushed me to the side and didn't want to do anything to help restore me and make me right. I mean, I was a teenager, I was a kid, and a lot of guys would high five that, but I still think that there's a misnomer. We don't understand the amount of pain and the amount of damage that happens to a child, to an adolescent, when we're talking about issues like trust or what a healthy relationship looks like, and expectations, and how to properly develop those things. And so I got married at 18 years old, met my wife in high school, and we got married about 5 months after we graduated high school. We got married at 18 years old. Next month, we celebrate 21 years. We have 3 beautiful children. And, I'm not going to get on here and paint a picture like it's always been, sunshine and rainbows, because it hadn't. But I can tell you that the majority of the time when it hasn't been sunshine and rainbows, all falls on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when we're hurt or when we've been affected by some type of event or some type of occurrence in our life, um, we don't really know what we need in that moment. I've had a lot of people ask me, Adam, how can I help? How can I help? And I remember in those moments thinking, I don't even know what I need. I don't know how you can help. I know I need it. Just start somewhere. Just show me the way. And so it's through a process. It's through a process, and I'm not sure how deep you really want me to go in that. But that ultimately led me for several years, sort of going down a rabbit hole of bouncing career to career, job to job. It really wasn't career, it's job to job, because I couldn't find fulfillment. And what I was really trying to do is fill a void in my life, and that void could only be filled when I allowed a living God to heal me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you this, and I've shared this one other time. Something that happened this year was I had to cut ties with a very close family member. It was very painful. And because of their relationship with the two pedophiles that hurt me as a child. And so I made a choice. I was like, in my 39, almost 40 years of living and the things I've gone through, I've never talked to a professional, like a spirit-filled professional trauma therapist, somebody who specializes in that. And so I did that. I called a buddy of mine in Oklahoma City, and I said, "Who do you recommend?" Because I would trust this dude with anything. And I talked to him, and he put me in touch with somebody. And I'm going to tell you something. It was life changing. It was a process called EMDR.
Yeah.
And so I've gone through that, and I've realized that, all through this time when I was trying to fill this void through whatever job or whatever opportunity or whatever I was doing, I was really trying to drown out this voice that says you're not good enough. And I was trying to make people say things like, I'm proud of you, and I appreciate you, and I'm so grateful for you. And what I didn't know was I was just trying to fill sort of those places that were undeveloped from my childhood, because I was jacked up because of things that had happened to me. But I also realized I'd started developing this sort of victim mentality, to where, all this stuff happened to me. It happened to me. It happened to me. Until one day I realized how strong I'd become. And I realized that God had given me a gift, and that our pain and the trauma and the things we've been through, it can be a curse or it can be a blessing. And it's really up to you how you respond to that. And so that became sort of my mission, was, what can I do with this sort of mess to use it for good in my life? How can I use it to help others? Because the more I began talking about it, the more I realized there's a lot of people sort of hiding in the shadows here that really want somebody to say, hey, there's a better way. And so that's just a little bit. And then started my career in law enforcement in '09. But that's just in a nutshell sort of what I think what you asked me.
Yeah, of course. And I know there's layers upon layers with that story, but I'm glad you said something in there. You talked about being a victim, and I wanted to also get your thoughts on this, because you kind of alluded into it. But what do you say to the audience who, first, I would observe from that story that it took a while for you to get to that place of not only naming that pain, claiming it, and then addressing it. We got a lot of people, like you said, that are just, if we don't talk about it or address it, it goes away, which it really doesn't. So what do you say to that person that has a hard time drawing a line between being a victim, which is a very real thing, and being victimized, which is an ongoing choice? So what do you say to that person that maybe is struggling with that line?
Well, I'll tell you this. For me, it was the realization that, for me, God owns my steps. He orders my steps. But if he orders them, and if he's Lord of my life, and he's my Redeemer, he's the only one that showed up when I was getting ready to take my life. Then if he orders my steps, he owns my steps, then he's king of my heart. And I renew my mind according to the words that he's given me, or speaks through. And but if we look at what God owns in my life, And I thank him for the blessings of new opportunities and new businesses.
Mm-hmm.
He's not selective in what he owns
Yeah.
if he is my king, right? So if that's the case, then he also owns the debt.
Mm.
And so when I've submitted my life to him, it's because of his grace and his mercy that he now becomes owner of the debt. So the same thing with being in great shape and having good health and being mentally strong and never having any type of traumatic experience. We thank God for people that have gone through that. But also, if we're going to thank him for the good days, we thank him for the bad days, the hard days. There's really no bad days. There are no bad days when you give your life to him.
Mm-hmm.
There's easy days, there's hard days. There's not bad days, there's no good days, they're easy or hard. So every day is a good day.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm thinking about the pain and when you're talking about the victim mentality, I think about it like this. I quit being a victim when I realized I no longer owned the pain. It wasn't mine anymore.
Wow.
But growing up, I would say, you hear kids talking about this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, and I would hear older people say my cancer or my tumor or my diabetes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
mine, it's mine, it's mine. We possessive with that stuff. Well, my pain, my past, my trauma. Well, the day I surrendered to him, it was no longer mine, and so it
Mm-hmm.
became his. So now he owns the pain. He is the king of that. He handles that, and so that's where my healing began. When I said, "Well, I can't be a victim if I don't own it no more,"
Right.
and I gave it to him, the ultimate healer. And so, I really don't know,
That's
the,
good.
the specific moment, the specific time, but I can tell you that if you're going to thank him for the blessings, if you're going to thank him for the good times, you also need to thank him for the pain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
too many times we give, in my life, well, I'll just speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for everybody else. But in my life, I caught myself saying, Lord, thank you for the blessings. Thank you for the new clients, for the new business, for the new opportunities. Thank you for these things. And then one day it hit me, and it was like, why don't you thank me for owning the debt? Because you can't be selective in what I own.
Yep.
And that's the problem. We want to be selective
Good.
in where we want God to dwell and abide in our life because there's places we don't want him to go. But
Mm-hmm.
when we sort of open that gate to the things that we've suppressed and hidden, that's when we truly begin to live.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, that's spot on because, ownership can be good, but it's also, there's a time, like you said, to give him the ownership because there's freedom attached to it.
That's
And so
right.
once that happens and he's sitting there just waiting, he's begging for,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, hey, bring it. And he tells us to lay that down. But for people that are listening right now that were where you are, man, it might be easier said than done. And there is a process. We're not saying that this is an overnight thing. You're living proof of that. But we're also saying that there's a God waiting on you. There's a God waiting to take that off your shoulders and then freedom
That's right.
attached to it. Because what I'll say is your work since those days of giving him the debt, letting him
Yeah.
take ownership, your work has become purposeful and you've been able to use it. So that leads me into my topic when I mentioned earlier that you're a sheepdog enthusiast. So I want to read something that I looked up about sheepdogs. Okay. I have a lot to learn on the matter. But I'm going to have you kind of put context around your story around this. But a sheepdog is so a good one. What I read is one that possesses natural instincts. Okay. But a great
Mm-hmm.
sheepdog is one that is born knowing how to work the herd, has natural power, patience, and possesses a great aptitude to learn quickly. One that never worries sheep, but works with them with a quiet, determined confidence. So I read all that to say, man, what I've watched you do exemplifies and makes a ton of sense that you kind of attach yourself to that sheepdog symbolism. Talk about just what I read and how it applies to you because, man, you are that guy that doesn't worry the sheep, but works with that quiet, determined confidence. Say some more about that if you would.
Yeah. So my dear friend, my brother in Christ, co-author, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, really took that word in the original context and coined it in the usage as we discuss. And so for those that may listen, I'm going to really make this super short. But the true definition of a sheepdog, what is a sheepdog? Well, there's three types of people in this world, three types of people in the world. There's one that has no love in their heart, and their sole purpose, kill, steal, destroy. They don't have any good in them. They are the wolf. And then you have the sheep. They have no capabilities of violence, but they're loving and they'll do what they're told. They'll go and they'll do. They will never present a harm to you. They'll never present a threat. And but they have really no capability of violence. No real strength or training or possess any qualities to stand up to the wolf at the door. But then there's one who is driven by love, not by hate, but driven by love. Where the wolf is driven solely by hate and evil, this individual is driven by pure love. But they are also capable of presenting superior righteous violence in the face of the wolf. And they stand between the sheep and they stand between the wolf. And they look at the wolf and they say, not today, not on my watch. And as Colonel Grossman say, this is as far as the minions of hell get to go. And so that's what we need. And so my mission is to be sort of like, and I hate to use it, but I really don't know any other way to do it, is to provide the bread and the cheese, to provide the nourishment spiritually to those who serve. And why do I not serve? Well, I'm still a reserve deputy. I don't say where, I don't talk about it, but I still, I miss policing every day of my life. But the fact of the matter is there's 24 hours in a day. And I felt that I could have more of an eternal impact doing this than I could staying where I was at.
Yeah.
And so I served for 6 years and I left in 2015, October 1st, be 6 years ago. And God has time and time again shown that the fruit out of that decision was the right decision.
Yeah.
I have moments where I feel really guilty for not being there serving, especially in times of crisis. But I have to remind myself, and many others remind me, that not every sheepdog has the same exact task or assignment. And so my mission is to keep them, providing the spiritual nourishment through written devotions, through speaking engagements, through content on social media, website, whatever the case is, and building alliances with others that are on the same mission, that have the same heart, character, integrity, and that sort of thing, that want to go and serve those that are still on the front lines. I have one mission, and it's really simple, to reach every single first responder in America with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you're looking, as far as law enforcement, somewhere around 800,000. And since May of 2018, I think we've reached close to 100,000. And then you look at firefighters, EMT, paramedics, and every other first responder, dispatchers. You're somewhere around the 4 million range altogether. I believe 3 or 4 million. So that's the number that I want to reach. I want to reach every one of them with the gospel, and that doesn't include families. That's a lot of people have told me that is too tall a task, it's too big a goal, it's impossible. But how do I do it? It's one day at a time, one life at a time, one opportunity at a time. And when somebody invites me to go speak, go do it. Or when they ask me to do a podcast, do it. But it's not always easy. And I think that when it's not easy, we have to remind ourselves of our purpose. And our purpose isn't always tied to a career or vocation. It's tied to what we were created to do. And what were you created to do? Maybe your career right now is just a vehicle to fulfill a part of the purpose, but your bigger purpose is probably something that you haven't tapped into yet. Maybe you have, but on the sheepdog, I think that's, I think, you look at who you are. What are you? Are you going to be the one, maybe it's not, where you're at, maybe it's not a threat of violence. But maybe you're standing against the radical liberal left. Maybe you're standing against, I don't know. I don't know what you're standing against, but you have to stand in the gap. And that is the sole purpose of what we have to do. We have to be willing to stand between the threat and those who have no capability to defend themselves. So
That's good. Yeah. And, it's all about planting your flag and really as a believer, for sure, there's things that we stand on that we don't negotiate about. And I think, the sheepdog doesn't negotiate either in certain
Mm-mm.
situations. There's certain things that just won't stand. Hey, while we take a break real quick, I want to give a shout out to my two sponsors, Armored Coffee and Randy Lavere up in Indiana, and Summer Moon Coffee in Conroe with Angie Kober and her family leading the charge with the coffee representation here. And we are thankful. They have offered tons of support. They have offered great products. And I encourage you guys to look them up online, follow at Armored Coffee or at Summer Moon Coffee Conroe. Hit them up, go to their website, order some of their products. It's great coffee. Take it from somebody who drinks coffee all day long. So thank you very much for your support, Armored Coffee and Summer Moon Coffee Conroe. I'm glad you talked a little bit about law enforcement because I want to talk about that, being that this series is Behind the Shield and we're honoring those that serve in the military or public service and those kinds of things. And man, I know that I know a little bit about your story, and I know it got dark at times. So, talking to this audience where people are maybe stuck in a career that A is just miserable, B, maybe they're dealing with some emotional issues that they're struggling with, that it's getting dark. Talk about take us back a little bit to the beginning, kind of why you chose law enforcement, challenges about kind of being in that environment as a believer. I know you weren't the entire time, but can you talk about some of that transition too?
Yeah. So, you know, I told you about the period that before I became a cop, I sort of bounced job to job. I remember one day, before I became a law enforcement officer, I was a pest control technician, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Loved it, had a good time, whatever. But it wasn't like my peak. It wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And some people it is, no shame. But for me, I wanted to do something bigger. And I remember looking at my kids one day and thinking, when somebody asked, "What does your daddy do?" What did I want them to say? And I wanted them to say, "My daddy's a cop."
Mm.
And I wanted to be able to say it with pride. And there used to be a time in our country where that was the case, where you wouldn't fear for the safety and the well-being of your children when they said that in school. This isn't an America that I recognize in a lot of ways. There's still patriots, but I think that the tyrannical rule of a big overreaching government is really, really starting to take a toll. And there's going to have to be a lot of changes. But I remember thinking about that, and then I remember seeing these guys that were, because of the type of business my dad was in, I'd see him around, and he had a lot of friends that were in law enforcement, and I remember, man, seeing them and their families and how they were there if they were ever needed. They were there, and their families were strong as oaks, and I wanted to be like that. And so it was a combination of seeing someone that I wanted to model myself after, want to model my family after, and then sort of making that mark for my children. And so I got in, a lot of people say, "Why do you become a cop?" And a lot of people say, "Well, I want to help people." But some say, "I want to drive fast and I like shooting guns," and that's okay too. But cops are still heroes.
Yeah.
No matter what the Chinese bought American media may tell you, cops are still heroes. And so goes all the other first responders and our American military.
Yeah.
But becoming, going into law enforcement wasn't going to be a 6-year thing or 5-year thing or 4. It was going to be a lifetime thing. And so when my parents divorced when I was real young, my biological mother remarried a man that was a preacher, and so I knew what church was, and I'd heard about Jesus, and I'd been at services all my life, and but it was presented in a very different way most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was presented from a fear-based approach instead of a love-based decision.
Yeah.
Like my life, I want to live my life that is a proper response to the perfect love demonstrated for me by one who never had to give anything, right? So instead of you don't do this, don't do this, don't do this because you're going to be punished, that's not God.
Mm-hmm.
God is a God of justice, yes, judgment, but all that was covered at the cross.
Yeah.
And so we want to live a life that's in proper response to that. So anyway, going to law enforcement, that was important for me. And so, man, I thought my faith was strong. I thought it was solid. I thought I knew that I knew that I knew. But
Mm-hmm.
what I soon found out was I knew rules and regulations. I knew laws. I knew all these, rigid things, but I didn't know the perfect love. And so, I don't know what all you want me to share, but
Yeah.
a long story short, I got to a point to where, man, the laws wouldn't cover the pain anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The fear, all the things that I was told not to do, I was doing most of them. And but all this while there was a little voice, this little tiny voice that would whisper, there's nothing you can do to change my love for you. Even when I was sort of interrogating God based on his goodness and love, through all of it, there's nothing you can do to change my love for you.
Yeah.
And so drinking
Yeah.
every night, and ultimately separating from my wife and kids, and sitting in a patrol car one Sunday ready to end my life. I'm here today because, and I don't mean this in a religious way, like saved, get saved, born again. I am, but I'm here today because Jesus saved me. And
Mm-hmm.
if it weren't for a living God who stepped in and saved me in that patrol car that day, I would not be here today. And so I
Yeah.
owe my life. I am absolutely here out of pure obligation, out of love, because of what he's done for me. And
Yeah.
that's my mission, is to help everybody that I can experience the love that changed me in that patrol car that day, because it's life changing. It'll
Yeah.
change everything about you.
Yeah, yeah. So getting to that point, maybe just brief, in case there's somebody that maybe they've been there, or maybe they feel themselves on a slippery slope spiritually, or even just emotionally in this line of work, possibly. Man, how did you get to this darkest point? Being that you've been in church, being that you knew the rules, of
Mm-hmm.
course, but again, you said you weren't necessarily in touch with that love component of a living God. Man, how did it get to that point? Just being that dark, and that moment of God showed up in the right time. He always does. But how do you get to that point?
So, I've thought about that. I've sort of analyzed it and Monday morning quarterbacked it. But the best way to tell it is like, in a story, and I'll
Yeah.
make it really quick. But
Yeah, you
as a
got
little
it.
boy, I was told there's a part of the yard that I could not play in, or something I couldn't go around. Well, it was because that there was a guide wire, a cable, and it
Uh-huh.
was poked out. And so they knew if I got around this, that I'd get hurt. So there's a story there about boundaries and rules and all this other stuff, but whatever. So I was told not to go in there. So as a boy, what did I do? I went around it.
Yep.
Well, I got around it, and I cut my arm really, really badly on the inside of my right arm. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. So what I did was I looked at it, and immediately, I mean, I still got a scar. I knew this is going to have stitches. I've like got to go to the doctor, but if I go tell them, they're going to know where I got it from. I can't tell them what happened. So I would take like paper towels and tape it up. But it got to the point to where it became really, really infected, and I had to go see a
Mm-hmm.
doctor because it was really infected. So for me, it was hiding the hardest, most painful parts of who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Look, like you carry stuff on your own for so long. Um, it's easy to tell someone, just let it go. And more than teaching them how to let something go, we need to prepare people on how to live in victory. How do
Mm-hmm.
you live whole again? Because people sometimes, once you've lived an entire lifetime in pain, in defeat, when you get into a place of wholeness and healing and victory, you're almost tempted to self-sabotage because all you know is that pain and
Right.
defeat you lived in.
Right.
And so it's not only about how do you get out of this, but how do we build on this, and how do we build a life outside of this? It's like, this is the way it's supposed to be. And that's what I've been learning. So it was more about me hiding the wound, trying to deal with it myself until it got to the point where it was so affected, I had to go see the great physician.
Right.
And life-threatening wounds. And so I tried to carry stuff on my own, and I probably could have just answered the question saying I tried to carry it on my own. But I think a lot of us tend to sort of cover up those wounds that we got in places we should have never been, relationships we had no business being in, places we should have never gone, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we're ashamed. But there is no shame. There is no condemnation. There is no guilt in him. He sets you free, and he sets you free completely. And he says, come to me, bring it to me, lay it down, and I'm going to give you a life you never dreamed of. So,
yeah. Well, so what, given the statement you made earlier about our country is a little bit unrecognizable from what it was at one point, especially in the law enforcement arena. What do you say to your child that if they come to you and wants to go into law enforcement? What's your thought to them? And I mean, I know you're raising them up in the love of the Lord, but what do you say to your child if they want to be in law enforcement?
well, as a child, you want to give them all the information that you can, so that as they become an adult, because I'm not wanting to raise children, I want to raise productive, good, God-loving adults. So as I'm talking to them, if they come to me and ask me that, I want to provide them with all the information. This is the history. This is where we've been. This is what happened, and this is where we are now. Because our society, it sort of seems, goes through these phases. Like this isn't new. It's new.
Right.
It seems new because of the way it's being packaged and delivered. Hate is not new. Evil is not new. Chaos is not new. These things are just packaged differently and delivered differently. So, and policing is as old as the centurion you read about in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to them, I want to give them all the information, the good and the bad. And I want to try to present them to them in a way that is unbiased, because at some point, they're no longer a child. And they're going to do what they want to do as an adult. And so you want to provide them with information that they can make the best decision that they can as an adult. Yeah. Not being manipulated or controlled or deceived or pressured by you or previous statements or anything. You want them to make those decisions solely based on, this is what God has called me to do. And now I've looked at the pros and cons, I've counted the cost, and I'm going to answer the call. Yeah. And so you know whether you've been called or not. And so
that's good.
That's a hard one, because I mean, your not your ultimate, but your immediate, like, knee-jerk reaction is absolutely not. But you said, talking to my children. Well, to my children, I'm not going to say absolutely not. I'm going to say, well, here's what you want to think about.
Yeah.
And the people that have mentored me the best and been most effective in my life have always presented it like literally trying to guide me instead of force me. So that's my recommendation.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's a good way to put it, because a lot of us, like you said, as parents, I think we take the easy road whenever we want, when we have tough conversations approach us. And I think what you said was spot on, because, make an informed decision, can't do that without information. So you got to give them the good, bad, the ugly, but you also got to maybe paint a picture and frame it of, it's a purpose that's bigger than you. And that could apply to anything in life. So if you're calling, like you said, if your calling is to do something that's bigger than you to help other people, and this is where you feel like you want to do it, I'm going to be behind you and support you the entire way. We can't necessarily base our decisions and our answers to our kids. And this isn't a parenting conversation, but again, it kind of is. We can't base that on fear. And I think we base a lot of our decisions and conversations around fear. And it sounds like to me, you've had to have some of those challenging talks or maybe even just informative talks, which is good. And they can get there on their own. But man, as we kind of transition, I mean, this kind of is on the same topic, but I want to ask you this because I love when people give an answer to a hypothetical, right? So a younger version of you, when did you enter the police force? When did you enter law enforcement? How old were you?
I was, oh goodness,
In your 20s, right?
like 28.
Okay. So a mid-20 guy, mid-20s Adam comes to you, right? You're looking across the table at yourself. What's a piece of advice? So you've already bought into, they're going, I'm going into law enforcement. It's not a question. What's a big piece of advice that you would give that maybe could have changed the course of your law enforcement career possibly, or a piece of advice that you wish maybe you would have had the answers to the test on, something a heads up on would have been nice, right? Somebody that's been down the road ahead of you. You have anything like that might benefit somebody right now?
Yeah, you're going to be tempted to carry everything on your own. And you're going to be tempted to put that calling ahead of the people that you were called first to. That's your family, your spouse, and your children, if you have them. But just being a cops, that's not the only calling that people put ahead of their families. I've known pastors do it.
Yeah.
I've known preachers, evangelists, and people in the ministry that have done it, and they do it because it's God's calling. But first of all, Jesus didn't ask you to lay your burdens down. It's a commandment. Lay them down. It is one of the greatest unaddressed and brushed under the rug sins of humanity that we try to carry everything on our own.
Pride, right?
And I would say be cautious. Establish a daily routine. I don't care what the schedule, what shift, what's going on, what happens. Get it in at some point every day. You sit down, you have a conversation with your spouse, you spend a few minutes with your kids, you spend time with God, and you keep those things priority, because I promise you something. I guarantee it beyond a shadow of a doubt that one day you're going to hang up your gear.
Yeah.
And when you do, you're going to be replaced. What do you have to go home to? What do you have to go home to? Now, some may already be in that place to where they've ruined it. It seems like it's beyond repair, but let me assure you that God is a God of restoration and healing. And if you will seek his guidance on it, he'll take care of it. But if you aren't there yet, that's who I'm really talking to. If you're not there yet, listen, you take the time and take care of your relationship with the King of Kings. You take care of all this stuff in here, because hey, out of the heart flow the issues of life. Guard it. The issues, all the stuff, but the heart in taking care of our mind, our body, our soul. Now, when you come out of the academy, you're going to probably be in great shape. And after a few months, you're going to say, I want to keep doing it. But, time goes on and you become lazy, you become apathetic and complacent. We do the same thing in our marriages. We do the same thing in our finances. We do the same thing in our careers. We get comfortable. That's our human nature. When we have nobody to challenge us, when we have nobody to push us, when we have nobody to pull us up sort of out of that ravine, that pit, that's where we go. And that's where we go to die. And so take care of your mind, take care of your body, take care of your soul, take care of your marriage. If you're married, take care of your family, and then take care of what you got to do at work. Yeah. Because you will be replaced there. You will be totally forgotten, with the exception of a few water cooler conversations.
Right.
And then one day you're going to be buried. And when you're buried and they lower that box in the ground and they throw dirt on the top of it for the first time, what are the people standing up above ground going to say? I don't give a crap if you say I was a good cop. I don't care if you say I was a great author or a great speaker. I don't care if you said I was a great businessman. None of that means a hill of beans to me. Yeah. I want you to say, Adam, let other people know that there's a God that loves them, and he guided them to it.
Yeah.
Adam loved his wife. Adam loved his kids, and he was a family man.
Yeah, of course.
Because the businesses and all this other stuff is going to go away. So if you'll do those things, I can guarantee your life's going to be exponentially better.
And your journey your journey has looked different. Like the complexion of it has kind of evolved over time. And there was a time, just like with me, I don't know how many people were able to say those good things about me at a time. And then we've evolved and we've learned and we've gotten good people in our lives. I do have a couple more questions, and I just give me one thing regarding we talk about the public perception of police officers, law enforcement in general, society and not everybody. I mean, there are a lot, I think more than not respect that role. I think we only hear about the loud squeaky wheels that have a problem with it. But
of course,
what are the misconceptions that the public kind of has about that job, about law enforcement and officers? And what's a misconception or a thing that if you peeled back the veil a little bit, that kind of see us behind the curtain, what are law enforcement officers, guys or girls, what do we not get about that role as a public?
Yeah, I think that probably the biggest thing that the public forgets is that, you get pissed off with them when they arrest you. You get pissed off with them when they write you a ticket. Everything that you think negative about them is likely due to a negative experience you had with a cop that was having a bad day or was just a piece of crap. I don't know. There are pieces of crap that wear a badge. They're few and far between, but there are some that should never have put it on. But I think we forget that behind every badge and color of the uniform, whatever, department, sheriff, police, whatever, that behind every badge, behind every uniform is a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And we hold that profession, and rightfully so, to a standard of absolute perfection, zero defect profession. Like, we're not going to give a pilot a pass if he crashes a plane and kills everybody because he was having a bad day.
Right.
You're not going to give a police officer a pass. You're not going to give a law enforcement officer of any kind of pass for having a bad day. Now, that is when it involves the rights of someone or someone's life, things of that nature. So remember, they are human beings, therefore imperfect.
Yeah.
And remember that the negative things that you hear that's all you're going to hear about them is the negative things. Mm-hmm. How many times do you hear about the good that they do? Because most of the time, all you hear is the negative. So, your perception is shaped about law enforcement by all you read on social media or in the mainstream media. And they're telling you what they want you to know and what they want you to believe and how they want you to perceive them for a specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I would challenge you to get out, if you have a citizen observer program in your local department, I don't care if you hate them or not. What kind of low-life scum doesn't try to at least come to understand why people do what they do?
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting back blindly hating them, and you really can't even justify why you hate them.
All right.
And so I would say this. I would say sign up and go ride along with a cop. Go through the Citizens Observer Academy. You know what? You're probably going to learn something.
That's right.
And so, but the book I'm working on now, it's called Standing in the Gap, and it's not for law enforcement. It's really for the church and anybody else that'll read it and put it to work.
Yeah. That's good.
And it's 10 strategies to pray for and support law enforcement.
That's good.
And one of the number one questions I get from people is how do I pray for cops? How do I support them? And so I'm going to give them a tool that'll do that. That'll help them do that and help them learn how. So, even people that hate cops will buy behind the badge just so that they can get a little insight. And, and I talk to Christians that say they hate the cops and they hate them with a passion. And so, therefore, if you have hate in you, what does God's word say? You're not his.
That's
so challenge them on that. So anyway,
Well,
that would be my point. Challenge the hate.
That's good. And we're going to get into at the end here after I ask you one more question. I want to hear about your resources. But so one final question, and I didn't even have this on the list, man. We always go off script a little bit, but something tells me you can handle it. Hey, who is the unsung hero in Adam Davis's story?
Well, the sung hero is my king, my redeemer, Jesus. He's the central hero of everything.
For sure.
I am not the hero of my story. It is him. Sure. But I'll tell you straight up, man, God doesn't build furniture. He doesn't print money. When people pray for help, he sends a first responder in most cases. But when you ask for a demonstration of unconditional love, it's often people that are right beside you. And so the woman that has loved me through all this stuff, is my wife. And if it wasn't for her, I don't know where I'd be today. Because I remember looking at the way she loved me and thought, wow, that's the way it's supposed to be done. It's not, are you worthy of it? Do you deserve it? It's, I hope that you will accept it. And so she is absolutely the unsung hero, because I try to let people know every chance I get, but it's still not enough.
Yeah. There's always, I was, man.
And my dad, I got to give my dad challenged the crap out of me all along the way.
Did he?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then there's a chaplain that sit in the car one night when I was really rough to be with. I can list that.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I am not self-made, and you'll never hear me say that. I've got so many people I can name off.
Well, yeah,
we can definitely the rock.
We get that. We definitely comes across, and the authenticity is evident. So, man, as we kind of close up shop, I appreciate you coming on. But talk about not only you talked about the one you're working on, but the book that you wrote or co-wrote, Behind the Badge, and then a couple of the devotionals, and just the impact that you're seeing from those, and where we can find you.
Yeah, I wrote Behind the Badge in 2017, and it released in 2018. And I get messages I get messages weekly from people that ask, "Did you write this today?" Which is stupid, because how could I have printed it and had it out there today? That is the power of God's word. So Behind the Badge I wrote, that was by myself, no co-author. And then after that was Bulletproof Marriage. I co-authored with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, and that book has been phenomenal. I don't even know how many thousands and thousands of marriages that has had a positive impact on. And of course, we have the Bulletproof Marriage Masterclass that people can sign up for. And then we have On Spiritual Combat that came after that. I co-authored that with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And then after that came Behind the Lines, which is a daily devotion for the military. I co-authored with Chad Robichaux. Nice. And then I have a book coming out this fall called Prayers and Promises for First Responders, co-authored with Colonel Grossman. It's 78 devotions with lists of scriptures that you can use as reference for different topical issues. And then next year with Chad Robichaux, Fight for Us comes out in February, and there's a film in the process of being made that'll come out afterwards. But man, I tell you what, I've heard the testimonies of men and women from every walk of life, and first responders, military, come to a relationship with Jesus. A real authentic relationship with Jesus. And right in the midst of their pain, they come to know him. I've heard of the marriages that have been restored and reconciled, and now they're thriving and flourishing. I've heard of the men and the women who had planned to take their own life, but because of something I was given an opportunity to say, and sometimes a place like this, or through a book or website, they found a purpose to live again. They discovered that they were created for a purpose. So, the marriages, the lives, the salvation, the testimonies, the the addictions, the people who no longer wanted to live, but now found a will to live again.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know. You can't put a price tag on that.
No.
You know, that is eternal value.
Yeah.
And if I stopped everything I do and I stopped today, I would be fulfilled if today was my last.
Yep.
Because of that work. But I do it because there's one more. And I want to reach one more.
That's right.
And it's not for me. I mean, obviously,
No,
it's not for fame, because Lord knows I ain't famous. It is for him and him alone, and to let people know that there is a better way. If you've been carrying it by yourself, there's a better way. So you can check out my website. It is theadamdavis.com, THE-AdamDavis.com. Somebody else owns AdamDavis.com. The Adam Davis was the best thing I could come up with. It's horrible. So theadamdavis.com, you can check everything else out there. And be sure to check out Reboot Recovery when you get a chance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Audience, man, this has been even better than I expected. And I expected a lot from this interview, and it's been tremendous. And it's been an honor to get to know you and hear your story even further. So, you know, audience, you heard it from the head sheepdog today. You go look it up, find out how you're supposed to fill that role of a sheepdog in your family and your community. But you know what? Putting God first is where this all starts to change. And so until next time, audience, he's been Adam Davis. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.